Midnight, December 12th, 1942. Iron Bottom Sound. Off Guadalcanal, a dense tropical darkness blankets the sea. A line of Imperial Japanese Navy destroyers plows through black waters near Cape Esperance, running fast with all lights extinguished. Their mission? A secret supply run to the embattled garrison on Guadalcanal, sneaking in under cover of night. For a moment, the only sounds are the hiss of wind and the rumble of diesel engines. Then, chaos. A sudden firebolt tears through the darkness as two American torpedoes slam into the lead destroyer, IJN Teruzuki, with a thunderous roar. The blast blows her rudder to pieces and ignites an inferno midship. Japanese sailors are flung to the decks as their ship reels. Tracer rounds zip across the night sky and star shells burst overhead, casting stark white light on the churning sea. In the illumination, tiny shadowy craft can be seen weaving among the massive warships. A handful of American patrol torpedo boats has sprung a deadly ambush. As machine guns chatter and 5-inch shells splash down around them, the little PT boats dart through curtains of spray and shrapnel. On one torpedo boat, a gunner lets out a triumphant shout. The Japanese flagship is ablaze and dead in the water. In the space of minutes, the feared Tokyo Express convoy has been thrown into confusion. The night erupts with gunfire and flame, and the men on those wooden PT boats grasp that they have seized the advantage. Under the cover of darkness, the Mosquito Fleet has stolen the night. The dramatic assault in the darkness was not a chance encounter. It was the result of weeks of desperation and daring in the Guadalcanal campaign. By late 1942, American and Japanese forces were locked in a brutal struggle for this strategic island in the Solomon Chain. Control of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal could decide air supremacy in the South Pacific, so both sides poured in troops and ships. Japanese forces, unable to approach by day due to relentless American air attacks, resorted to running supplies and reinforcements at night using their fastest warships. Night after night, squadrons of Japanese destroyers raced down the Slot, the narrow sea channel between the Solomons, carrying food, ammunition, and troops in a desperate effort to sustain their army. These high-speed nocturnal runs were nicknamed the Tokyo Express by Allied forces. Leading many of these runs was Rear Admiral Raizo Tanaka, a torpedo warfare expert whom the Americans grudgingly called Tenacious Tanaka. Tanaka's flotillas became notorious for slipping in at night and vanishing by dawn. Every successful run kept the Japanese army in the fight, and every failure brought them closer to collapse. But the Americans were determined to choke off the Tokyo Express. After several major naval battles in the preceding months, however, the U.S. Navy's heavy surface combatants were depleted. In the Battle of Tassafaronga on November 30th, 1942, Admiral Tanaka's destroyers had surprised an American cruiser force at night, sinking one cruiser and heavily damaging 3 more with deadly long-lance torpedoes. This stinging defeat left the U.S. Navy wary of committing more big ships into the nightly Solomon melees. With precious few cruisers or destroyers available near Guadalcanal, American commanders turned to a new weapon to harass the enemy under cover of darkness: the humble patrol torpedo boat. Known as PT boats, these were the Navy's smallest warships, nimble, wood-hulled motor torpedo boats barely 70-80 feet long. Each PT boat weighed only around 50 tons and carried a crew of 12 to 17 young sailors, average age barely 20, packed into its tight quarters. What they lacked in size and armor, they made up for it in speed and firepower. 3 powerful Packard V-12 engines could push a PT boat to about 40-45 knots, over 50 mph, fast enough to outrun most larger ships. They bristled with weapons: 4 Mark 8 torpedoes, each a 21-inch fish capable of holing a destroyer, multiple 50-caliber machine guns, and often a 20mm cannon or other rapid-fire guns mounted wherever they could fit. Yet the boats' hulls were made of layered mahogany planks, just 2 inches thick. Against a warship's shell, a PT boat was as fragile as an egg. There was no armor to speak of, only speed, agility, and the cloak of night to protect them. As one PT veteran put it, the boats were pound for pound the most heavily armed vessel for their size, but they could be blown apart by a single hit from a destroyer's guns. By the fall of 1942, these nimble craft earned the nickname Mosquito Fleet, swarming at night to sting much larger prey. Their mission around Guadalcanal was to patrol Iron Bottom Sound each night, lie in wait for Japanese ships, and launch surprise torpedo attacks. Darkness was their ally. The PTs usually operated at night when their small silhouettes were hard to spot. They painted their boats in dark camouflage and sometimes even muffled their engine exhausts. Still, it was a deadly cat-and-mouse game. The Japanese often responded to PT attacks with searchlights, star shells, and furious cannon fire. The PTs learned to lay down smoke screens from stern-mounted generators to obscure themselves when escaping at a high speed. They also knew the dangers of their own technology. Early in the war, American torpedoes were notoriously unreliable, often running too deep or failing to explode, and a PT boat's wake could betray it if any bioluminescent plankton glowed in the disturbed water. A glowing trail pointing right to the boat. These nightly duels were as much about nerve and skill as firepower. In early October 1942, the first PT boat squadrons arrived at a crude forward base on Tulagi, a small island just across Iron Bottom Sound from Guadalcanal. The young crews, fresh from stateside training, quickly adapted to the tropical conditions, living aboard their bobbing boats in the heat and humidity, wearing cut-off khakis and going shirtless under the equatorial sun. They endured swarms of mosquitoes, giving their fleet its apt nickname, and the constant threat of Japanese air attack on their base. Each sundown, as dusk fell over the Solomons, the PT crews would paint their faces with mosquito repellent, check their weapons, and ready their craft for night patrol. Engines were warmed, torpedoes armed, and lookouts reminded to stay sharp. Many of these sailors had never seen combat. Now they were about to pit their tiny boats against some of the Imperial Navy's deadliest destroyers. Throughout November and into December 1942, the PT boat Mosquito Fleet and Tanaka's Tokyo Express were on a collision course. The Japanese destroyer runs were typically composed of 8 to 12 ships, each carrying hundreds of fuel drums converted into supply canisters to be tossed overboard for pickup by Japanese troops near shore. Admiral Tanaka orchestrated these missions with tactical genius, and he had so far managed to keep the lifeline to Guadalcanal open, but at a steep cost. Repeated naval clashes, and American airstrikes by day, had whittled down Japan's available ships and left their troops on Guadalcanal on the brink of starvation. For the American side, every Tokyo Express run that got through was a missed opportunity to end the stalemate. The PT boats became their best bet to turn the tide at night. As Ensign Bryant Larson of PT 109 noted about these night skirmishes, the night actions meant limited visibility with patrol sections scattered over a wide area. Anything we could do to get a better track on the Express and bring maximum boats to the attack was worth trying. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation. Tiny wooden American boats, armed with courage and torpedoes, set out to hunt the Tokyo Express under cover of darkness, and on this December night, that hunt would reach its climax. Guadalcanal, December 11th, 1942. Late evening. A sliver of moon hides behind clouds, leaving the tropical night black and starless. On the horizon, beyond the northwestern tip of Guadalcanal, a vigilant Allied coast watcher radios a warning. A large Japanese naval force is inbound through the slot, estimated to arrive off Guadalcanal around midnight. Admiral Tanaka is making yet another high-speed run to resupply his beleaguered troops. This time, Allied intelligence has even intercepted Japanese signals outlining the convoy's composition and schedule. The Americans know what's coming. Tanaka's reinforcement unit of around 8 destroyers, including his flagship Teruzuki, laden with 200 drums of food and medicine for the island's hungry garrison. Waiting for him, hidden in the coves of Tulagi and along Guadalcanal's coast, are the U.S. Navy PT boats of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadrons 2 and 3. The order goes out: intercept the Tokyo Express at all costs. On Tulagi, engines roar to life as American sailors don helmets and life vests. 8 PT boats are available for tonight's operation. The flotilla's commander, Lieutenant John Searles, quickly lays out a plan. The PTs will split into groups to cover the likely approaches. 2 boats will patrol close along Guadalcanal's shore as lookouts, while the others form a strike group lying in wait in Iron Bottom Sound. Their goal: attack the Japanese as they reach the supply drop point off Cape Esperance. The American crews double-check their gear in the darkness. Torpedo men's mates arm detonators on the warheads. Gunners load belts of .50 caliber ammunition into the twin machine gun turrets. One sailor quietly fingers a Lucky Charm in his pocket. Another, barely 19 years old, wipes sweat from his hands and tries to steady his breathing. It's a moonless, overcast night, perfect for an ambush, but also fraught with uncertainty. Each man knows that if they are spotted, their 80-foot wooden boat could be blown apart in seconds by Japanese guns. Shortly after 2300 hours, 11 p.m., the PT boats fan out into the night. Lieutenant Henry "Stilly" Taylor, commanding PT-40, and Lieutenant Lester Gamble in PT-45 take point as part of the strike force. With them is PT-59, commanded by Ensign William "Bud" Kreiner, a recently arrived officer eager to prove himself. Farther east, PT-109, with Lieutenant Searles aboard as overall commander, and PT-44, Lieutenant Frank Freeland, patrol nearer to Cape Esperance, ready to pounce from another angle. Another pair, PT-43 and PT-61, linger south as a contingency, watching for any Japanese attempt to sneak around or any accompanying submarines. The American boats move into position at idle speed, running lights out, almost invisible in the gloom. The sea is calm, but the tension is thick. Sailors speak in whispers over the headsets. Through the inky blackness, they listen for any hint of the enemy. The faint drone of ship engines, or perhaps a silhouette against the starlight. Just before midnight, lookouts on PT-40 catch a glimpse of something. Dark shapes emerging from the northwest. Shadowy outlines against the slightly lighter sky over the open ocean. It's the Japanese column, right on schedule. Taylor grips the wheel and signals to Gamble on PT-45 nearby. Enemy in sight. The American boats immediately snap into action. Taylor and Gamble push their throttles forward, swinging their boats in a wide arc to get ahead of the oncoming Japanese formation. They aim to cross the T of the Japanese, to be in position to fire torpedoes across the destroyer's path. But as PT-48, another scout boat in the area, under Lieutenant Robert Searles, moves to flank the enemy, disaster nearly strikes. One of PT-48's engines suddenly sputters and dies. The crippled boat loses speed at the worst possible moment. Japanese lookouts spot the slowing PT-48, and within seconds, searchlights snap on from the lead destroyer, spearing through the darkness. Caught in the beam, PT-48 becomes a target. Muzzle flashes bloom from the Japanese destroyers as they open fire with 5-inch guns and machine guns, the tracers lancing out toward the lone, stalled PT boat. Lieutenant Taylor doesn't hesitate. Seeing his comrade in peril, he wheels PT-40 around in a daring maneuver and races back toward PT-48's position. Ordering his crew to launch a smoke screen, Taylor drives PT-40 between the disabled PT-48 and the enemy destroyers, zigzagging to draw the Japanese fire. Shells splash all around as he lays down a protective curtain of smoke. Under this cover, PT-48's crew manages to restart their engines and slip away, disappearing into the darkness by hugging the shoreline. Taylor's quick action saves PT-48 from almost certain destruction. Now, however, PT-40 has painted a bullseye on itself. The Japanese, frustrated of one target, swing their searchlights toward Taylor's boat. PT-40 is still inching closer to the Japanese line, trying to reposition for an attack even as water geysers erupt around it. Meanwhile, the main strike group of PT-45, Gamble, and PT-59, Kreiner, has looped out to the enemy's far side. Gamble's PT-45 creeps in as close as he dares, 800 yards, 600 yards from the Japanese column, closing the distance. Through his binoculars, Gamble can make out a huge Japanese destroyer cutting through the water ahead. It is Teruzuki, the flagship, identifiable by its larger bridge structure and the flicker of signal lamps as Tanaka's crew urgently communicates amid the firing. The Japanese convoy has begun to slow down to deploy the supply drums, having reached the drop zone off Guadalcanal's Cape. Unbeknownst to them, they are sailing into a trap. Gamble seizes the moment. "Stand by torpedoes," he hisses into the intercom. Torpedo tubes are swiveled to their firing angle. At FO 30, 12:30 a.m. on the 12th, PT-45 leaps forward at attack speed and Gamble gives the order, "Fire 1, fire 2. With a concussive whoosh, 2 Mark 8 torpedoes streak out from PT-45's tubes, leaving bioluminescent trails in their wake. "Fish in the water," the crew shouts. Gamble immediately veers away to break the attack run, banking hard to port and dumping smoke to cover his retreat. He doesn't stay to watch the results. Survival instincts take over as Japanese guns flash angrily in PT-45's wake. But moments later, a massive explosion lights up the night behind them. One of Gamble's torpedoes hits home. It slams into Teruzuki's hull on the starboard side with a shattering blast, ripping a gaping hole in the destroyer's engineering section. A towering plume of water and flame erupts from the flagship's midsection, and debris rains down on the sea. Shouts of alarm echo across the Japanese formation. The unthinkable has happened. A 50-ton motorboat has mortally wounded a 2,700-ton warship. Ensign Kreiner in PT-59 is right behind Gamble. As the first torpedo hit illuminates the target, Kreiner's crew can actually see Teruzuki's bridge and deck through the smoke and fire. Seizing the opportunity, PT-59 rushes in even closer, a mere few hundred yards off Teruzuki's beam, and fires 2 torpedoes of its own at the stricken flagship. One torpedo streaks beneath the flaming destroyer and misses, but the second detonates with a blinding flash against Teruzuki's bow. The Japanese destroyer is now hit at least twice, engulfed in flames and listing. Admiral Tanaka himself is wounded in the chaos. Thrown to the deck by the blasts, he suffers shrapnel injuries. On the flagship's bridge, officers are desperately barking orders to extinguish fires and save the ship, but it's clear Teruzuki is in dire trouble. Her rudder is blown off and engines crippled, leaving her adrift and circling helplessly. Ammunition aboard begins to cook off in sporadic blasts. Within minutes, Teruzuki's crew starts abandoning ship. Sailors can be seen leaping into the oily water as flames consume the destroyer's stern. For the Japanese flotilla, everything has gone wrong in moments. The carefully planned supply drop turns into a nightmare. Some destroyers do manage to dump their cargo of supply drums overboard. About 200 tightly packed drums splash into the sea. But now survival, not unloading, is the priority. The remaining Japanese commanders, stunned by the sudden loss of their flagship, react quickly. Destroyer Kawakaze, sailing astern of Teruzuki, swings about to engage the attackers and cover the flagship. Her captain spots a PT boat silhouette cutting through the dying firelight. It is PT-44, Lieutenant Freeland's boat, which had been making its own torpedo run from the south. Kawakaze and another escort, Suzukaze, both train their guns on PT-44 and open fire with a vengeance. Freeland never gets the chance to launch his torpedoes. A barrage of 5-inch shells and 25mm cannon rounds converges on PT-44. One moment, the boat is hurtling forward to attack. The next, a bright flash and deafening crack mark where PT-44 used to be. A Japanese shell scores a direct hit on the torpedo boat's fuel tanks, and PT-44 erupts in a fireball. The explosion is so violent that it momentarily rivals the burning destroyer for attention. Wooden shrapnel and pieces of flaming debris shower down on the waves. The PT is literally blown apart. Fragments of the hull briefly flicker on the surface before sinking. Of PT-44's crew of 11, 9 men are killed instantly in the blast. Only 2 survivors are flung clear and left clinging to wreckage in the darkness. Nearby, PT-109 has also been trying to press an attack amid the chaos. Lieutenant Searles aboard 109 sees PT-44 vanish in the fireball and realizes they could be next. Japanese searchlights start probing for the 109. Searles quickly orders, "Lay smoke and evasive." PT-109's crew launches a thick smoke screen and the boat slips away behind the pall of smoke, zigzagging to avoid the shells now falling around it. Under cover of smoke and darkness, PT-109 manages to disengage, its attack run aborted, but the crew alive. They know they've been lucky. The sky is now alive with enemy flares and tracers, and 2 of their sister boats, PT-48 and PT-44, have been knocked out of action. Back on the north side of the convoy, PT-40 and PT-48, the duo that first made contact, are also fighting for their lives. After shielding PT-48, Lieutenant Taylor on PT-40 finds himself the target of intense fire. Yet, even as shells straddle his boat, Taylor sees the second torpedo blast rip into Teruzuki. Over the radio, he hears Gamble's excited voice, "Scratch one destroyer." There's no time to celebrate. PT-40 is still under pursuit from a Japanese destroyer, likely Arashi or Kuroshio, which is now charging through PT-40's smoke in an attempt to ram or gun them down. Taylor orders his throttles to full. The 3 Packard engines howl as PT-40 accelerates to over 40 knots, racing away into a squall of spray. The Japanese destroyer looms behind, firing blindly. PT-40's gunners return fire with their twin 50 cals, sparks flying as bullets rake the destroyer's bow. It's like a hornet stinging an elephant. Nuisance fire, but it distracts the enemy gunners. Amid the furious chase, one PT gunner keeps his cool even as enemy shells scream past. Gunner's mate Cletus Osborne on PT-40 notices a belt of 50 cal ammo ablaze, ignited by a near miss. Braving the risk of an onboard detonation, Osborne grabs the burning ammo belt with gloved hands, yanks it out of the gun, and flings it overboard before it can explode. Thanks to such cool-headed acts, PT-40 miraculously survives several hits from Japanese machine guns, with only minor injuries on board. In the confusion, Taylor's boat slips into the darkness and breaks contact. One by one, the American PT boats disengage, disappearing like ghosts back into the inky night. By about 00:45, the ambush is over as suddenly as it began. The surviving Japanese destroyers, reeling from the torpedo strike and unsure how many PTS still lurk nearby, begin to retreat in disarray. With their flagship gone and fires raging, the officers on scene decide to abort the mission. They leave behind hundreds of supply drums floating ungathered. Destroyer Kawakaze comes alongside the crippled Teruzuki just long enough to rescue Admiral Tanaka and as many crew as possible, then she and the others flee northward at high speed. The once proud Tokyo Express is now a convoy of wounded and shaken ships, racing up the slot to escape further torpedo attacks. Iron Bottom Sound falls quiet again, save for the crackle of flames on the dying Teruzuki and the lapping of waves against scattered debris. Back near Cape Esperance, PT-59, PT-45, and PT-40 rendezvous briefly, blinking recognition signals in the dark. On PT-45, Lieutenant Lester Gamble allows himself a grim smile of satisfaction. He's just helped take down a Japanese destroyer, a feat almost unheard of for a PTA boat. Over the radio, fragmentary reports come in. One of our boats hit. PT-44 is missing. 109 is safe. I think we got one of them. The PT crews are elated but also sobered by their own losses. They circle to search for survivors of PT-44 and manage to pluck the two dazed, oil-soaked crewmen out of the water in the darkness. There is no sign of other survivors. The rest of their comrades went down with the shattered boat. It's a heartbreaking moment for the tight-knit Mosquito Fleet. These men all lived and fought side by side at Tulagi. Out in the Sound, the Teruzuki's final moments come shortly after 3 a.m. For hours, the stout destroyer refuses to sink outright, sitting low in the water, burning stem to stern. The Inferno eventually reaches her aft magazines and depth charge racks. With a thunderous secondary explosion, Teruzuki's own depth charges detonate, ripping the ship apart. In a hellish orange glare visible for miles, the flagship rolls over and slips beneath the waves, taking the bodies of at least 9 of her crew with her. Iron Bottom Sound earns yet another wreck in its graveyard of ships. The PT boat sailors witness the distant explosion and know that their prize has finally gone down. As dawn breaks on December the 12th, 1942, the scene on Iron Bottom Sound is one of eerie calm, a stark contrast to the chaos just hours earlier. A few blackened oil slicks and pieces of charred wood bob on the gentle swells where PT-44 met its end. Nearby, seagulls circle over floating supply drums that drift uselessly in the currents, never to reach the Japanese shore. Only 220 out of the 1,200 drums that Tanaka's convoy tossed overboard are ultimately recovered by Japanese troops. The rest either floated away, sank, or were destroyed. Some were even strafed and sunk by PT boats and U.S. aircraft the next day. The Tokyo Express run of December 11th to 12th has failed decisively. In the annals of naval warfare, the night's results are astounding. A brand new Japanese destroyer, Teruzuki, lies on the bottom of Iron Bottom Sound, torn in two. This Akizuki-class warship, commissioned only a few months prior and built to be a formidable anti-aircraft escort, is now a mangled wreck because of the audacity of a few PT boats. Rear Admiral Raizo Tanaka, Japan's famed Tokyo Express commander, has been wounded and literally knocked out of the fight. In fact, within a few weeks of this incident, Tanaka is relieved of his command and sent back to Japan, partly due to the injuries and the disgrace of losing his flagship. The Japanese Navy, shocked that their heavily armed destroyers could be so vulnerable to tiny torpedo boats, is forced to rethink its nighttime operation. No longer can they assume the darkness guarantees safety. The Americans have shown they can own the night. For the U.S. Navy, the engagement is a much-needed victory in miniature. The Mosquito Fleet's daring ambush dealt a blow far out of proportion to the PT boat's size. Word of the sinking spreads quickly through the South Pacific forces. It is a huge morale boost to learn that an 80-foot plywood boat could sink a 440-foot destroyer in a stand-up fight. The PT boat crews, once considered an auxiliary at best, are now proven giant killers. "They got a destroyer," incredulous officers remark in mess halls at Tulagi and Espiritu Santo. The feat helps silence some of the earlier criticism of PT boats, dismissed by some as toy boats or improvised little craft. The night's success shows that with bold tactics and teamwork, these small ships can punch well above their weight. Yet the victory is not without a price. The Americans mourn the loss of PT-44 and 9 brave crewmen who gave their lives in the fight. Several other PTS returned to base riddled with bullet holes, their paint scorched by near misses. Exhausted sailors bear fresh scrapes and bruises, minor injuries from the wild, high-speed maneuvers and the concussion of near hits. As they gather back at the Tulagi base at sunrise, there's no triumphant parade, just quiet congratulations and reverent silence as the survivors of PT-44 are helped ashore. These young men have seen comrades and friends vanish in an instant. They know tonight could have gone differently. A direct hit on any of their own boats would have meant a similar fiery end. The human cost of their guerrilla war at sea is never far from mind. Strategically, the impact of this night ripples far beyond the waters of Guadalcanal. The destruction of Teruzuki and the foiled supply mission worsened the starvation and sickness plaguing the Japanese army on Guadalcanal. Every drum of food that didn't arrive hastened the weakening of those troops. Within weeks of this action, Japanese soldiers were reduced to half rations or worse. Combined with relentless American pressure on land, the failure of Tanaka's Tokyo Express runs in December contributes to Japan's fateful decision to withdraw from Guadalcanal entirely. Indeed, in early February 1943, the Imperial Japanese Navy executes Operation KE, an evacuation of all remaining forces from the island. Guadalcanal becomes the first major strategic victory for the Allies in the Pacific, and cutting off the Japanese resupply effort was a decisive factor. The PT boats had proved their worth in that endeavor. As Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, Chief of Staff of the Japanese Combined Fleet, noted with frustration in his diary, so few supplies were getting through by late 1942 that he even wondered if the army on Guadalcanal was hiding stockpiles. Not realizing the truth was that most of the supplies simply never arrived. The PT boat squadrons continued to harass Japanese naval forces throughout the Solomons and beyond. They earned a fearsome reputation. The Japanese began calling these green-painted marauders night monsters or devil boats, and later in New Guinea, the green dragons for the way their tracers and phosphorus wakes snaked across black waters. Lessons from nights like December 11th were quickly absorbed. The Navy equipped PT boats with better gear, radar sets, improved torpedoes, and more firepower to increase their lethality after seeing what they could do. But the essence of their combat style remained the same. Hit hard, hit fast, and disappear into the dark. Closing. Legacy of the night raiders. In the quiet after midnight on that fateful December night, the PT boat sailors had proven something profound. They showed that courage and ingenuity can triumph over brute force, that a handful of men in plywood boats could outfight steel giants under the right conditions. The battle in Iron Bottom Sound was a tableau of contrasts: David versus Goliath, darkness versus light, desperation versus determination. The PT boats had turned the very cover of night that the enemy relied upon into a weapon against them. They literally stole the night out from under the Tokyo Express. Years later, historians would look back on the Guadalcanal campaign and recognize the significance of these nocturnal duels. The sinking of Teruzuki by PT boats was more than just a tactical win. It was a symbol that the Imperial Japanese Navy's aura of invincibility at night had been shattered. Tiny U.S. Navy craft, skippered by young, resourceful officers, helped bring about Japan's first major setback on land by severing its lifeline at sea. The men of the Mosquito Fleet went on to fight in many more battles across the Pacific, from New Guinea's coasts to the Philippines, but the legend of that night in December 1942 always stayed with them. As the sun rises on Iron Bottom Sound, the waters gradually swallow the last traces of the Tokyo Express's failure. A lone PT boat putters back to base, its hull scarred but intact, the crew weary yet filled with pride. They have written a new chapter in naval warfare, one where speed and surprise trumped might and armor. The echo of that night's battle carries a simple, solemn lesson. Sometimes, fortunes in war can turn on a few courageous men and a well-placed torpedo in the dark. The PT boats had their victory, and in doing so, ensured that the night belonged to them. It's a story of heroism and audacity that still inspires, a reminder that even in the vast darkness of the Pacific War, a small boat with a brave crew could light up the night and change the course of history.